running them. They were very eloquent, and they have very interesting material in them. There was no European influence. This is just developed indigenously. They bitterly condemned the industrial system, which it said was crushing them, taking away their culture, their dignity, their freedom. They said that people who work in the mills should own them. They opposed wage labor as an attack on elementary integrity, and they were very wide, and those views are very widely accepted. So, for example, Abraham Lincoln described wage labor as not very different from slavery. The only difference is with wage labor, it's not permanent. Slavery, it's permanent. Actually, opposition to wage labor was a Republican Party slogan. Now, it's taken a lot of effort to drive these thoughts out of people's minds, because those are very natural ideas. And they keep coming back. So, for example, the sit-down strikes in the 1930s terrified the business world. And there's a good reason, because a sit-down strike is just one step before kicking out the bosses and taking over the factory and running it for yourself. And that's when the strong New Deal measures came in reaction to this. And it keeps happening. Just happened a few weeks ago. A factory in Chicago was going to be closed down by the multinational who owns it, and the workers protested, and finally they sat in the factory. And that's, like I said, one step before taking it over. And the owners backed down. The factory's still there. A lot of the workers got their jobs back. I mean, they're very interesting examples of where when a factory is closed and the industry is closed down, the workers offered to buy it, and the multinational who owns it would profit from that, because they'll buy it and pay off the multinational. If they close it down, they get nothing. But very typically, the owners refuse, because profit is less important than blocking socialism. You know, workers take over of industries, and it's. They're very interesting cases if you want details. I mean, there's a famous case, it should be famous, about 20 years ago, I guess, in Youngstown, Ohio, when U.S. Steel, the steel conglomerate, was going to close down their Youngstown plant, which of course destroys the community because it was all built around steel. There were protests. Finally, the workers and the community got together and offered just to take over the plant. The company went to court to prevent it, and the courts backed the company. And that's an idea that terrifies power systems, whether they're east or west. The idea that people will actually take over their own lives is totally intolerable. The same thing happens in international affairs. I mean, take, say, U.S. antagonism to Cuba. We know what it's based on, because we have the internal documents. It's based on, I'll quote, what's called the danger of the spread of the Castro idea of taking things into your own hands, which may spread and influence others suffering similar conditions who may try to take things into their own hands. And that leads to the erosion of the U.S. Latin American empire. So we have to stop it.
La crise actuelle, 3 000 emplois détruits chaque jour en France, 10 000 aux États-Unis, etc., tout ça, ça accélère la prise de conscience. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'on entre dans une période où la lutte sociale, la lutte de classe peut augmenter? Non? Sceptique.
You can never predict. I mean, you couldn't predict in the 1930s that they would succeed in putting enough sort of band-aids on the system so that it would quiet down. Remember that the Depression lasted right until the war. It was the war that overcame the Depression. I mean, the war, the U.S. moved to a semi-command economy, which was extremely efficient. I mean, almost quadrupled industrial production, and that led to a big period of development thanks to state intervention.
La guerre a été une solution?
Was the solution. And if the if the war hadn't come, you don't know what would have happened to the industrial system. Maybe it would have, maybe sit-down strikes and other activism would have expanded.
Sombre perspective, alors, aussi pour aujourd'hui.
You don't know. I mean, this state-sponsored private ownership system is very resilient because you can always call on state power, which is what's happening now in the financial system. And how far it'll go, you know, nobody knows.
Sur tout ça, nous avons très peu de pouvoir. Notre pouvoir est très réduit.
They actually have a lot of power, but they have to be made to feel that they don't have any power. It's very important for the whole propaganda system to make people feel impotent. You can't do anything. You just have to watch. You know? But it's not true. People could have plenty of power if they act together. And that's the constant struggle that goes on. I mean, that's why there's such fear of democracy in elite sectors everywhere, including the West. It's a very dangerous idea, democracy.
La démocratie est une idée très dangereuse.